So you might be hoping to start a career in finance, and you might be wondering how much travel is actually involved in the job and what do you actually do when you travel. And in this video, I'm going to cover exactly those topics based on my experience working in finance for the past 6 years. So you might know from my previous videos that I work for one of the big four accounting firms in the corporate finance team, and there are three main reasons why I've traveled in my career so far. And that's to work with my project team when they're based at another location, to work with the client at their client site, and to do site visits. So that's visiting a client's factories, for example, when working on a transaction. Traveling so that you can work alongside your team does bring some benefits, at least on paper. And one of the main ones is that you'll be much more efficient as a team in getting things done. And the reason for this is because you can just tap people on the shoulder and ask them questions, review their work, for example. And so, at least on paper, people do believe that working in the same room does bring benefits. And so you might need to travel for that very reason. Another benefit of working alongside a project team is that the junior members of the team have a better learning experience, and that's because the people they're learning from, the more senior members, are just sitting alongside them, and so they can learn by osmosis and pick up technical points and pick up even soft skills such as how the senior members of the team communicated with clients on telephone calls, etc. And so there's definitely a better learning experience for the more junior members of the team, and hence the case for why people should be traveling and sitting together as a project team during projects. Another reason why, at least on paper, the project team should sit together is that they build better working relationships. By sitting together, you'll probably have more frequent communication in comparison to speaking on telephones and on Teams, for example. And so by having more frequent communication, you start to build a better relationship. You start to understand what people are expecting of you even before they have to tell you. Again, building better working relationships drives efficiency as a team, and definitely on paper at least, you should be traveling so that you can sit together. And when you get together as a project team, you can also enjoy the evenings after work's finished to socialize together and have dinners together. And that really helps to build stronger connections within the team, which should lead to a better, more efficient team over the long run. And so those are the reasons, at least in theory, on why you should be traveling so that you can work alongside your project team. And now the obvious thing to say here is that over the past 15 months, there hasn't been any traveling for work and working together as project teams because of COVID. And so companies have invested heavily in IT infrastructure and making sure that teams can collaborate digitally. And so I know my firm uses MS Teams, and I can see every month or two there are new features that come into the application that help us to work together seamlessly. So things such as being able to edit documents simultaneously, that's really useful, and that's something that our project teams utilize a lot. And so you don't have to worry about and waste time sending and receiving PowerPoint presentations. You can work on one document together as a team. And so companies are investing a lot heavily, and I certainly believe that there'll be less travel in the future in relation to working together as a team. One caveat to say about this, though, is I still think people will value being together as a project team when it comes to the social aspect of it. And so I think there will be some travel, but I think it'll be predominantly centered around being together so that you can build a better personal relationship with your working colleagues. Another reason why I traveled previously, as I mentioned before, was to work with clients at the client site. And it was important to do this sometimes because it showed that we valued the relationship that we had with them. And so being there physically with them and spending time with them really allowed us to cement that fact. Now, clearly, since the pandemic started, we haven't been traveling to client sites to work with clients. And I think people's attitudes to client meetings in person will change slowly. And people will start to realize that you don't need to visit a client in person every single time. And it might be time efficient to actually do virtual meetings majority of the occasions. And there still then might be a few occasions when you do have to have in-person meetings. So the final reason why I travel was for site visits. And so that would be visiting a factory, for example. And let's say I was working on the buy side, I'd be asking questions of the factory manager, making sure that we're doing all the due diligence possible, representing our client at the site. If I was working on the sell side, I'd be accompanying the site manager, making sure that only appropriate questions were being asked by the buy side representatives. And so these site visits are really interesting because you get to understand how the factory operates, what the processes are, what the machines do, etc. And it's something really different than the day-to-day finance job, which predominantly involves staring into a computer screen all day. And now it comes down to the question of how often do I travel? And it really depends on what type of project I'm working on and also what stage of the project we're currently at. And in terms of the M&A projects, you've got the buy side or sell side typical M&A deals, and there'd be much more traveling involved in a sell side deal because it's a lengthier process and you're working at the start of the deal to prepare marketing documents and you're working with the clients on a regular basis. And so it goes back to the point I was mentioning before, where we'd go to the client site and work with clients to show that we really value the relationship we have with them. And so being a lengthier process, so there'd be much more travel in a sell-side project. On a buy-side project, one of the key reasons for traveling, as I mentioned, was site tours. But aside from those, you'd not really have to travel too much. The other type of project which I'd do now and again was to write strategy papers, and those were very different because it could mean that we were at client side for a longer period of time. And this is similar to what the management consulting team or the audit department would do, where they'd be at client side for several periods at a time, which could be months. And this was certainly different to what a typical M&A deal would involve. In terms of how long we'd be away from home would vary a lot. It could have been the case that we travel all 5 days, so travel on Monday morning and come back on Friday evening, or it might even be the case that we travel just for one day. So for example, we travel on a Tuesday evening and then have a meeting with the client on Wednesday morning and afternoon, and then travel right back on the Wednesday evening itself. So what do you even see when you travel for work? In most cases, there's definitely not a sightseeing tour, and you most likely spend a lot of time just at the office and in a hotel room. And so you can't really compare it to normal travel at all. Typically, if I was doing a Monday to Friday travel stint, I'd fly in on a Monday morning and go directly to the office, finish up work at around 7 p.m. and then I'd go straight to the hotel to have some dinner and relax before falling asleep to get started again the next day. Between Tuesday and Thursday, I'd probably be working late till 8-9 p.m. or even further than that. And so there wouldn't be too much time in the evening to go around the place and see other sites. I did try and walk around the local area to get an understanding of the city and the town that I was in, but primarily I'd be at the office just doing the same work that I'd be doing back at home. And so it wasn't too different in terms of the actual work, but it was certainly good to get surrounded by a different working environment now and again. So that's how often and why I travel for work. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you want to hear more about whether certain myths about working at the Big Four accounting firms are true or not, click on the video on the screen right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.